Time goes by, years and decades. She comes, she goes, but her story remains so. She is you, I, and the others. She belongs to herself and not another. She is whole, complete, and absolute, for she is resolute.
Hello and welcome to She is Resolute. I'm your host Suvarna, and our endeavor on this show is to showcase conversations of grit and growth for the determined modern woman willing to take complete ownership of her life and her mindset. Our attempt is to bring to the fore actionable information on personal development through discussions with experts and personalities who have in one way or another proven that they too are resolute. So enjoy the episode and please do like, share and subscribe.
An international executive leadership coach, a Fortune 500 speaker, a business owner, an educator, a best-selling author, a neuroplasticity expert, and a comedian. I am not talking about a group of high achievers, but one superwoman who's our guest today. Jen Coken, ladies and gentlemen, is a force of nature who has made it her mission to work on some of the most relevant issues that we face today: self-doubt, self-love, and breaking down internal mental barriers. Recognized by renowned international organizers and broadcasters such as MSNBC, ABC, and TEDx, Jen has a unique capability of using tough love and humor to help and empower people to embrace their genius and own their success. For over 20 years, Jen has been helping people, particularly women executives and their teams, have the courage to be themselves and to lead without limits. She knocks down internal barriers that women tend to create and empowers them to make the money they deserve, get aligned, and build an authentic life. We are so excited to have Jen Coken on the show today. Welcome to She's Resolute, Jen.
I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. I'm going to jump right into the question. So in a day and age, like through my introduction, in a day and age when people barely manage to get one thing right, how do you manage to succeed in so many facets and areas?
I have no idea. I like my, when I wake up in the morning and I do my meditation and I do my prayer, people believe differently. I always say to my clients, God, dog, your Bob, Allah, whatever you want to call it, when I'm doing my prayers, I really have 3 prayers. God, let me lead with love. Let me be an instrument of your peace. Let me bring joy to others. And I have a Post-it note. I'm not kidding, like a Post-it note on my computer that's been there for like 5 years that says, you can't read my handwriting because it's horrible. Show me where to go. Show me who to talk to. Show me what to ask. The days that I don't have that prayer are the days that don't go well. When I have that, when I stop myself and realize, wait a minute, you're disconnected. You're not, my mind and my thinking is always on, how do I make a difference? How can I contribute? How do I provide value? While at the same time taking care of me, not burning out, pursuing the things I'm passionate about, like comedy, like performing. And somehow it all works out.
Wow. And I'm curious though, because generally you have this sort of sortedness after some sort of personal experience or after some sort of struggle or challenge. And I read that your mother suffered from cancer, and that period particularly and understandably was very difficult for you. So through such intense anxiety and grief, what were your personal learnings to cope with such a difficult challenge in your life? Does that sense of clarity come through that experience?
Well, it comes from that experience, but it also comes from a stand that I take. When you take a stand for something, like Gandhi stood for a free India. He didn't have evidence that was ever going to happen. He just had this dream that he wanted to fulfill. And like that rock in the water, he was like, water, go around me, because I'm standing right here. So my stand is always, this is my life. I'm here. I'm responsible, meaning I am the source of my existence. I am the source of my experience of life. And so I can either be victim,
right,
or I can relate to any situation, including my own cancer diagnosis last August. And thankfully Yeah, I was diagnosed with breast cancer last August. So the last 5 months, they're in the middle of the pandemic and COVID. I'm cancer free right now. I had surgeries. I had radiation. Like my last day of radiation was December 31st. I did not have to have chemo. My intention is to stay cancer free. I'm on a medication, but through all of that, it's like, okay, what is this meant to teach me? And I'll tell you, right before being diagnosed with cancer in July of last year, I was so busy with my business. I remember I have a small little condo, 2-bedroom condo. One bedroom is my office, and I had a little balcony, which really got me through the pandemic because we were in lockdown. So I had plants and flowers, and I on Amazon I got this little chaise lounge that was really low to the ground, so I couldn't really see people. All I could see was the plants. I felt like I was like in nature. And I remember collapsing on that chair one afternoon and just saying, "You can't keep up this pace. You've got to slow down." And bam. Literally, probably 3 weeks later, I found the lump in my breast. And I am of the opinion, but I'm only of this opinion because I choose it, which is that was the big, I'm stubborn. I'm hard-headed. I always say to God, you got to hit me over the head with a 2x4. And my ex-husband would say to me, please don't say that. Stop saying that, because there will be a 2x4 in the window of the truck. And I feel like that was that 2x4 of, okay, you've got to slow down. And it showed me a number of things. It showed me the team of people I had around me that I could rely on. It showed me I never went to one doctor's appointment by myself. Even through the pandemic, I couldn't see my parents. My family wasn't here, but I had a close knit circle of like 5 people that were my rocks throughout that whole thing. They wouldn't let me to go to any appointment alone. They were the people I could call. And there was a good 2.5, 3 months, I had no idea what stage it was, what the future was going to be. And I came face to face with my own death. However, going back to my mother's cancer, dealing with that already had me confront my own death and the way I live my life and the way everyone, I don't care if you have a penny or you have $1 million. If you live your life, how am I in service to others? How am I in service to my God? How am I in service? How am I bringing peace and love and joy to others? I knew if the diagnosis was stage 4 and you have 3 months to live, I could die satisfied because I knew I had made a difference in even the smallest way possible.
That is really beautiful and so incredibly, motivating for somebody who's trying to find some sort of purpose in life. And coaching is such a beautiful way to be actually be able to empower people. And I'm curious, I read that you initially were in politics. How did you transition? How and why did you transition into coaching?
Well, so I have been a coach for 23 years with a group called Landmark Worldwide. And that I was coaching 30 hours a week as a volunteer, but I was being trained and developed. So I led programs for them for 16 years, was a coach for them, coached like between 6,000 and 8,000 people or something crazy like that while I was in politics. Wow. But there was this moment, honestly, where I said to myself, both of these things are really about masculine energy of making things happen, pushing, which we need as females, we need that. We need the ability to, with the crisis in India right now, you were sharing the health of your family, like somebody's got to be like, okay, we need these things. We have to go make these things happen. That's the divine masculine. But I said it was time for me to marry that divine masculine with the divine feminine, that flow energy, that abundance energy, that loving energy. And I just knew it was time for me to complete leading programs for Landmark. And then honestly, I was laid off from the last job I had. And the next day my book came out. And I had a long conversation with God in like a week. I'm like, clearly there's something here for me, because I had been laid off of 4 jobs during the time I was writing my book. And I thought it was educating women about ovarian cancer, but I realized after about 5 months, I didn't want to be in the space of all that grief. There was something bigger. And so I went back to coaching, and then eventually found my way to coaching powerful women, because there's so few women at the top and so few women of color at the top that you don't have examples of what it is to be divinely feminine. And we need that right now, and rely on that grace, that ease, that flow, that all of that energy to be able to, that Shakti energy, right? To be able to be available and bring community and collaboration to others. And I wanted women in those powerful positions to embrace themselves, to love their femininity and bring that to work.
Wow, I love that. And I'm going to delve deeper into that. But just to give you a little bit of context, like coaching as a profession is generally understood in the corporate circles in India, and people understand therapy, but they don't understand that on the opposite end of the spectrum is coaching. So can you explain to our audience and women out there who are interested in pursuing coaching, what a day in the life of an executive coach like you looks like?
Yeah. And let me also say the distinction between therapy and coaching. Therapy
Right.
deals with the past. That's what therapy deals with, the past. Like what happened in your past that made you who you are today. Coaching is about how you want to show up today and in the future. What kind of leader do you want to be? What kind of woman do you want to be? Man do you want to be? Parent do you want to be? Irregardless of what happened in the past. So I am working with people to unlock those brain patterns that have kept them stuck. That's the only past-based coaching I do, simply to identify those points of origin and then say, okay, how do you want to show up? And this is a day in the life of a coach. I just got off a coaching call with a client, and my homework to her was, because we identified that brain pattern. I said, I just want you to be like you're observing your life. And I said to her, where do you feel that separation that she had with her dad, her stepdad, when she was a kid? She said, in my chest, I feel like I'm being crushed. I said, okay, that's your tell. So now over the next week, I said, I promise you, it's not only at home, it's at work. Just notice when you have that crushing experience, because you're going to notice all those triggers. And then we'll start to talk about how she wants to show up. So on any given day, it's distinct. You know, I'm either leading, I'm coaching people one-on-one. I have an amazing group program called the Dream Accelerator Academy, where I marry my campaign mindset of plans and actions with the letting go of your limiting beliefs so that people can make their dreams a reality and really start being held accountable for what they want to achieve. I also lead webinars. I do speaking, podcasts. And then hopefully there's those days where I'm doing my own content creation. I'm actually working on a 30-day greatness challenge right now. And that app will be launched June 7th, which is super
nice.
fun.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I'm really excited about it.
So that sounds so, interesting and so exciting. And I would encourage people to try and, explore this some more, because it's a really empowering thing to get into. I'm curious, you're known as the Velvet Sledgehammer in your circles. Why is that?
Can I swear on your podcast, or is that completely offensive?
I can swear.
Okay. So I'm just no bullshit. It's like love with no bullshit. You know, I'm going to call you out, because sometimes in my conversations with my clients, I'm fighting for them more than they're fighting for themselves. And what I mean by that is, when we're embroiled in our own suffering, we don't see the way out. We don't see, the human mind has 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day. 80 to 85% are negative. We have 3 times as many positive things that happen, but what do we go to sleep thinking about? The one thing that went wrong that we didn't have control over. 95% of our thoughts are repetitive. So when we're triggered, when our amygdala, that reptilian part of our brain, gets triggered, we're just reacting, and we're in the muck of the whole thing. We're not in touch with who we truly are. And so I will say to people, I'm calling BS on that. I don't believe you. Or I will say to people, you're not being coachable right now. You are fighting more for your excuses than you are being curious about how you want to show up in the world. And I have fired clients before too, who just they weren't willing to be great.
Yeah.
They weren't coachable in that moment. And I won't work with somebody who isn't ready to do the work and be coachable. One of my clients said, am I going to cry on every call? I go, well, I don't think you're going to cry on every call, but you may laugh on every call, because we always try to bring humor to it too, because this stuff's serious, and we get so serious and bogged down about everything that's wrong with us. That's the thing. There's nothing wrong with us. We are made in the image of one energy, a holy energy, and there's perfection in that energy, and that energy never dies. Our body does, but that energy doesn't. That is, we're all part of the same piece of that energy. That is pure, that is formless, that is light. There's nothing wrong with you. It's what your brain's telling you is wrong with you. So I keep interrupting and poking at the brain.
I love that you say that, because personal development, generally when people speak about self-development or personal development, they think it's going to be a breeze. But it actually requires you to be a little critical of yourself, be extremely self-aware, and it's a lot of work, and it's a long-term game. It doesn't happen overnight. So I'm glad you pointed out that you have to have a no bullshit mentality there, and you have to have an outcome mindset as opposed to having a victim mindset to really get from point A to B. That
really like curious, like you have to be willing to be curious and discover new things about yourself, including the bad news. I tell people, look, they say the truth will set you free, but it's going to piss you off first. You're like, why have I spent this much time like beating? I don't know. We don't know. Who cares? Let's move on. Let's create something amazing now that you see that.
Wow, that is incredible. And since we're talking about the things that, you work with, I noticed that your work emphasizes on the imposter syndrome. Can you tell us what imposter syndrome is and what led you to give this particular issue importance in your work?
Well, what led me to it is because I realized I was suffering from it. When I went into business for myself, I was really trying to find my voice, and I was struggling and I began working with a coach and studying. And so imposter syndrome is this feeling of self-doubt, even from very, very highly accomplished people. And I was doubting myself. I was questioning myself, and I worked with a coach. And what I realized was, wow, there's an originating incident where this all got, see, if you Google how to overcome imposter syndrome, there's as of 2 weeks ago, because I always do this before I teach a webinar on imposter syndrome, 2.44 million tips on how to overcome imposter syndrome. And none of it works because you can't manage your mind. You can't. Yeah. Your mind's always going to think. That's your brain's job, is to keep the thing it's a brain of alive, which is you. So the work I do with my clients is we get to that moment where you put your flavor of imposter syndrome together. And when we see that, we're able to break apart that brain pattern and then begin to create how you want to show up. So we're creating new neural pathways in your brain. So for me, I was 6. And I liked the same boy as my best friend. And I lived in Michigan, which is like the Midwest part of the United States. Very, very cold, really cold. And it was snowing and it was winter. And we were out in the playground and said, well, how are we going to know who he likes? And at 6, we decided we were going to chase him around the playground and push him down and see the brain of a 6-year-old child, right? We're going to see who he kissed. And he kissed Michelle, and he looked at me and went, ew. So Michelle is this petite little blonde girl with blue eyes and blonde hair. And I'm 5'10". You can't tell sitting down, but I've always been very tall, twice the size of the kids in my school. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just be the funny sidekick. And my whole career with politics was pushing other people forward, getting agendas passed, getting people elected. So when it was my turn to put my neck out, I might have been out there speaking and training, but when I was home by myself, I was questioning, doubting, scared, under the covers, crying. And the moment I unlocked that brain pattern, it was like, wah, like went from like black and white to Technicolor. I'm like, oh my God, I can see it everywhere. And then I could say how I want to show up: joyful, peaceful, and loving. Oh. And that's really it. And that's right. And it still gets triggered because you know what? If you're not playing a big enough game, you won't have imposter syndrome. If you're playing a big game, your imposter syndrome is going to get triggered because it's threatened. Your very existence is threatened, and that's okay. Play small. You don't have to worry about it.
When you're reactive. By play small, you mean when you're mostly reactive.
Well, playing small, meaning if your job is to sit on the couch and eat chocolate covered cherries, you're not going to have imposter syndrome. If you decide I'm going to open a chocolate covered cherry factory and now I got to figure out how to get the funding because there's lots out there, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm playing on the skinny branches. I don't know what I'm doing. Sure, imposter syndrome is going to kick in because you're stretching yourself. That's where we grow. You know, if you think about a rubber band, I don't think I have one. I usually keep one. If you think about a rubber band, if you're just looking at the rubber band, it's just kind of laying there. It's not doing its job. That's like you and me. If we're just hanging out, we're not doing our job. It's meant to stretch. So are we. That's where we learn and grow. So when you stretch it, it's doing its job. The key is don't stretch it so far that it breaks. So when we're stretching and growing, imposter syndrome is going to get triggered. We're in that meeting. We are asked to speak up, or somebody asks our opinion, or you're a female and you walk into, and I worked in an all male dominated industries. And as a white female, it's been much easier for me. But as a female of color, you walk into a room, there's no one there that looks like you. I mean, I did some work with a Society of Women Engineers, and they were telling me they wouldn't put on makeup or get dressed up to go to work because they were asked if they had a date, who they were seeing, were they going on a job interview. I said, are you effing kidding me? Why can't we be feminine that way in the workplace? What? So, you know, the imposter syndrome will kick in, and it's all about getting that originating incident, noticing the triggers, and then creating how you're going to show up. But you want a good coach like me to help you through that.
It's beautiful that you've knit in, your personal experience, your realization into your work, because I think that's when you can actually create impact, understand where your, footholds are, understand where your blocks are, and try and leverage that. So it's beautiful that you mentioned that and you use that in your work. Another issue that you talk about is the fact that we have limiting beliefs, and basically it's those limiting beliefs that get in the way of what we want to do ultimately. Can you tell us, in your experience as an executive coach for almost 20 years now, what are the common limiting beliefs that women have, and what would be your advice to women to recognize and address such limiting beliefs?
Wow. I'm just trying, I can't ask for help, because that will, if I ask for help, that makes me look weak. So I shouldn't ask for help. I've got to get this perfect before ... The if they're entrepreneurs, the website, the offering, if they're at work, the presentation, they work themselves to death. That's another one, is they just work way, way, way too much, because they think if they just work hard enough, they'll get all the accolades they need. It's always, those limiting beliefs are ways we think we're trying to feel better about ourselves. But I will tell you, it doesn't matter if you're somebody who is an entry-level professional or the CEO of a company. Everybody has the same kinds of limiting beliefs. Micromanaging. I used to be an awful micromanager because everything had to be perfect, and I didn't trust people. People like me, I was always, things came really natural to me. I was very smart as a kid. I skipped second grade. I graduated high school when I was 16. I went to university at 16, going on 17. So if things don't come easy, or if I don't see a clear picture, I start to doubt myself. I procrastinate like nobody's business. And I finally caught myself doing that. So the key things are trying to be superwoman, trying to be perfect, here's another one too, which I think we're probably going to talk about, is trying to figure out how to have it all.
Yeah.
If you had it all, you wouldn't have all the place to put it. You can't have it all. It is not humanly possible. So stop trying to be perfect. Stop trying to find balance, because they're illusions. Those are illusions of comparison.
Yeah. And even, I think certain setups in workplaces which are more male dominated and tend to also somewhere, this is my personal experience, make you a little less outspoken, or convey your needs verbally. And that in turn makes you feel like, oh, maybe I don't deserve it, or I shouldn't just talk about it because, it's not something that I'm not worthy of it. So these are really key things which I think cut across all sectors, and identifying it and taking those little baby steps to be able to, talk about it, or at least do something about it, I think is really, really key. And
also understanding everybody has it. You're not alone.
Yeah.
It's part of the human condition.
Yeah. Yeah. And since we spoke of balance, and now there's increasing pressure, even in the messaging that's there on social media, that, you have to have a certain sense of balance, whether that's work-life balance or whether that's some sort of balance in your family. But, it's a constant tussle to be able to reach that level of balance or to reach that level of perfection. And when you don't, you sort of get into the self-loathing mode of I'm just useless. I don't think I'm ever going to be balanced. I don't think I'm ever going to be perfect. So what, according to you, is the thing or the key values that we should look for instead of balance or instead of being perfect?
Well, first of all, perfection doesn't exist. It's actually an unattainable. If you look at the dictionary definition, it really talks about it being unattainable. Nothing's ever going to be 100% perfect. Nothing. You could look at a quote unquote flawless diamond and it's only flawless because the particular distinction means it has 0.000 to an infinity zero of a flaw, and hence that's flawless. So that's, just understand these are all illusions of our mind. Same with balance. And balance for me, because I think people think it's a place to get to, both of these things, perfection and balance. There's going to be a day, for example, when all the laundry is done and put away, where you have no emails in your inbox, where every doctor's appointment's been made, where your family, everyone is getting along, nobody's arguing, where you look perfect, where you love every ounce of you, from your left saggy boob to the hair you just found on your big toe and everything in between. And none of that's ever going to, and you're totally in love with your spouse, your partner, your kids, or your parents, and nothing will ever go wrong again. That doesn't happen. And what people forget, if you think about the ocean or the sea, when it comes in, right, there's a moment it comes in and then there's a hesitation before it goes out. That breathing in, there's a moment's hesitation before we breathe out. It's those moments of hesitation. That's balance. That's perfection. When we let go of our comparison and this illusion of balance and perfection, we start finding moments of balance and perfection in the day-to-day of our lives. It is not a destination like New Delhi. It is not a destination to get to. You can't get in a car and go to perfection or balance. You can't do it. Stop trying. Find it in those moments in between.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think my understanding of this is that gratitude in the little and the big things. I speak about it a lot. Like, even in the course of a busy day, if I take a sip of a coffee, which is like really delicious, I'm just grateful to be in that moment, to be able to do that. And
exactly. Or a sip of water, and you can feel like maybe you've been so busy you haven't been able to drink some water, and then you take that first sip of water, you're like, wow, I can actually feel that. That's happened to me where I'm like, oh, I can feel it nourishing my cells. Are like, yay, this is great. Yeah. And I think too, there's so much conversation about gratitude. I love the idea of gratitude, but for me, that didn't speak to me as much as appreciation.
Right.
Because I felt like gratitude became, again, a place to get to. There'll be a moment when I'm grateful. I should be grateful. Stop shooting on yourself.
Yeah.
Well, no, what can I appreciate about this moment? What can I appreciate about my mother's death from cancer? What can I appreciate about this moment of being with her in hospice? What can I appreciate about that moment where I sat on my porch by myself for 2 hours before I called the doctor, having found a lump, knowing what it was, and being paralyzed to call anybody until, I called my stepmom and said, walk away from dad, because my dad gets stressed. And she said, what's going on? And I told her, she goes, who can meet you? I said, I hadn't even thought of that. I called a girlfriend and she met me at the doctor's office so I wouldn't have to be alone. An appreciation of my stepmom thinking about that in the midst of the entire uncertainty of whether I was going to live or die. And the crazy thing with all that, I'll tell you this, I walked into 2020 having lost 80% of my business. Wow. I 2x'd my company by the end of the year. And the majority of that money was made in the last 5 months after I had been diagnosed with cancer.
Well done. Good for you.
Crazy. Because I started to let go of the perfection, of the balance. I started being present, right? Appreciating those moments. Joyful, peaceful, loving. How do I bring that right now? And I was quiet about it for many months. I didn't talk about it until I could be the author of my journey. And that's the other thing, going back to that victim. When we're a victim, we're not authoring our journey. Look, what's happening in India right now, that's actually happening. It is actually happening. Why is it happening to us? Why is it happening this way? If we get caught up in that, we can't actually be with the reality of what's so. And when we're with the facts, instead of our stories, when we're able to be with the facts, we have more ability to be objective and bring that sense of peace. So I'm always telling clients, separate the fact from the fiction. Buddha says all suffering lies in story, all suffering lies in worry of what we can't control. And that is, I absolutely believe that as well.
Wow, that's incredible. And there's such, beautiful values that you brought about, things like what means something to you to be able to, show up with purpose every day. And given that, we're in the middle of a pandemic and people are understandably stressed, there's so much uncertainty, people are depressed, people are isolated. What, according to you, would be 5 non-negotiable habits or behaviors that we should strive to inculcate to stay grounded and to stay focused in this time of uncertainty?
I think, one is nourishing our bodies, eating as healthy as we can, as good of quality food, and making sure that we are, I mean, it sounds stupid, but eating fresh, if we can, fruits and vegetables, and making sure that we're drinking enough water, just nourishing the cells of our bodies. That's number one. Number two, before we go to sleep, having a prayer or chant, whatever, to say, I'm letting go of everything that happened today. And thank you. I have a prayer every morning. I'm Jewish, and there's a prayer basically thanking God for restoring my soul to my body. And the other one that I love is having my bowels work. Like, it's thank you, God, for having a good bowel movement. I'm like, I love the Jews. We appreciate God for bowel movements. But, before I go to bed too, there's prayers to say to kind of cut the energetic cord with anyone you've come in contact with, to bless them, to let things go. Good night's sleep, quality sleep. If you need to, and number 3, stop watching the news. Get off social media. I mean, I've just stopped. I can't, I consume it when I want. So I have apps on my phone where I will choose consciously when I'm going to watch something. Even, with the whole George Floyd murder that happened in the US, I tried the first day to watch the trial. I had to turn it off because energetically I could feel it just messing with my system. So nourish your body, sleep, limit social media, meditate, even 5 minutes a day, of box breathing, 5 inhales, hold it for 5 counts out. That's going to reduce your stress and your cortisol level. And number 5, play. Do something to play, whether it's dancing around to some music or running outside in bare feet if you can, or listening, if you're on a phone call, stop with the Zoom and be on a phone call with somebody and recite some poetry, paint, do art, just play. Because I think that's been the key thing right now is we are so serious, and we have to be, about what's going on. We forget to play, and that's going to be key.
That is beautiful. That is like gold standard advice. And I particularly like the fact about consume less negative information, because there's always going to be a negativity bias and people are going to, give you more negative information, and it tends to control you. So the fact that you're scheduling it or consuming it only when you want is really, really critical. That was a really good takeaway for me as well. You're an expert in the field of neuroplasticity, and you often speak about the importance of forming the right neural connections. What, according to you, are the key thought processes or neural connections that women should try and develop, and how?
So I always talk about that. If you think about my hands as a line, this is a line of presence. Okay. And everything below the line is all reaction. Those are the 50 to 60,000 thoughts a day, 80 to 85% are negative, repetitive, et cetera. Start getting really good at catching those thoughts. Be an observer in your life, because I don't have a formula for how anybody should be, because there's so many ways that we can show up as human beings. In the moment that you notice, I'm trying to get a washer dryer. I haven't had a washer dryer here for 3 weeks through a whole bunch of things. They've been trying to deliver it. It was faulty, fix it. And I've been on the phone for hours with customer support, not being able to get through, getting hung up on. And I just kept noticing how much I wanted to get angry and blame. I'm like, okay, thank you for sharing, brain, because your brain's never going to stop having thoughts. There's only one time, and that's when you're dead, and then it's all over. So, just so everything below the line's reactive. Notice when you're reacting. And the moment you notice you're reacting, like, oh, I just noticed I have felt like I had a pit in my stomach. Oh, I just noticed I furrowed my brow. Oh, I just noticed I'm angry. The moment you notice that, then you're no longer a reaction. You're a human being with a reaction. And in that moment, we can have presence. Presence of what? Presence of mind, body, soul, and spirit. Mind to think clearly. Body to embody the kind of leader, person, human that you want to be. Soul to speak your truth, and spirit, God, Bob, your dog, whatever you want to call it, to move through you. It's that being able to hear that still small voice. Because if everything below the line is filled with negative interactions and brain patterns, what's above the line? What's above the line? Nothing. Nothing. It's a blank canvas. And just like great artists need a blank canvas to create a painting, humans create who we are with our words. So be careful what you speak. When we are casual with our words, we create casualties.
Wow.
We're painting our lives with our words. So continuously asking ourselves, how do I want to show up right now? How do I want to show up as joyful, curious, caring, empathetic? Do you want to show up as direct in this moment? Do you want to show up as intense? It doesn't have to be all unicorns and fairy dust. Do you want to show up as strong? Do you want to show up as composed? The world is our oyster for how we want to show up and create, and the kind of human that we want to embody. But it has to be a conscious, created choice. You're battling your ego. You're rebelling against your ego and the automaticity of our thoughts. To continually ask yourself, how do I want to show up? And every woman, she can show up however she wants to. She can show up as a fierce female. She can show up as a boss lady, as a whatever you want to call a strong feminine power. I want to show up right now as someone who's getting stuff done, because we have a lot of things to, okay, good. Someone who cuts through the crap. I want to show up as the Velvet Sledgehammer. Okay, that's how I'm going to show up right now. But it's that moment of recognizing the reaction, stopping, and consciously saying, okay, I notice I have a reaction. I get to choose. I'm choosing to stay above the line. How do I want to show up right now in this moment? That's why you said earlier, self-development is a lifetime. It is.
Yeah.
Because I could spend my lifetime asking myself, how can I be more joyful? How can I be more peaceful? How can I be more loving? And that is a life well lived.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you recommend, and this is something that I'd like to personally implement, I realized that most of my 20s I spent in a reactive, thought process, where I was mostly reacting to all the circumstances around me, whether that's work or relationships. It was mostly me being reactive. So it takes a while to understand that you're being reactive, firstly. And when you realize you're being reactive, to show up with intention, like how do I want to show up, takes a little bit of effort. So for me, I had physical cues to remind me that, okay, when I'm at work, this is how I need to show up. When I'm at home, this is how I need to show up. With my parents, this is how I need to show up. So I used to have phone reminders, and I used to have, a little bit of a few notes here and there, or I had physical cues that every time I'm crossing through a door, this is how I need to show up. So would you recommend that you anchor these thought processes to something to be able to reinforce that habit? Because for me, it took a long time, and I'm still struggling. But what are your tips to be able to show up with intention?
I think everything you said is so smart, because what we're doing when you're showing up with intention, you're creating new neural pathways that are not connected to the reactive state. Because in the moment you notice the reaction, you're saying, okay, how do I want to choose to show up right now? And it could be, if you take a Sharpie and write on your mirror, alcohol will take that off. So you are beautiful. Maybe that you want to show up as beautiful, as beauty. That's important to you. The reminders in your phone, I love. It could be a mantra. That's my 30-day challenge I'm doing. It's a 30-day challenge on being great. And there's going to be a daily mantra people say, and a daily inspiration videos from me of how they can practice showing up as great. I think because you're building muscle. Yeah. Right. So you're building muscle. I'm a cyclist. I used to do a lot of endurance cycling, 50, 100 miles, and I'm just getting back into it. So man, 18, 20 miles is a lot for me, but I'm remembering, I have muscle memory. I just did a hill training ride over the weekend and I'm like, oh my God. Okay, remember, sit back in the seat, pull up on your pedals, don't push down. It was reminding myself, but I'm experimenting with the practice called riding my bike. So I love what you said when you said, I went through the door and that's an experiment. Every time I go through the door, I'm going to practice being joyful and having a smile when I walk through that door. So you're identifying practices you're experimenting with in each case to build the muscle of choice of living a creative existence.
Got it. Got it. That is incredible advice. So, Jen, this is a question I ask all my guests. What, according to you, does it take to be a resolute woman?
Oh, wow. Being true to yourself.
Oh,
But then you have to discover the self that you're being true to, because so often we're trying to be who our family wants us to be, who society wants us to be, because when we incarnate in the way that I believe, we're carrying with us thousands of generations of females and how they were treated as chattel, as, hoped, all the things, right? So who's the self we're referencing? And that, that question of who am I has been something that stumped philosophers forever. I don't think there's an answer. I don't think there's a right answer. I don't think there's a place to get to. It's like you practicing all your practices of how you want to show up. You're continually asking yourself the question, who am I? How do I want to show up? That's the self. So it's being true to yourself. At the end of the day, as Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. Just discovering the self that you want to be true to.
that is incredible. There is so much to unpack in this conversation. And, I learned so much from you, Jen, and I could keep speaking to you for hours. Thank you so very much for taking out the time to speak with us. And I look forward to learning from the wonderful work that you're doing. Keep inspiring and stay resolute.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I was so blessed to be here and I loved having the conversation with you.
The pleasure was all mine.